Yeah, so I think just to put the UK in context, what we have actually seen over the last, even beyond 10 years, but back really sort of 20, 25 years, is fairly stagnant growth in the whole G7. So particularly Western Europe and Japan and the UK. The US has been a little bit more resilient, a little bit more robust, but not a massive amount, to be honest. But even within that, we've started to lag GDP per capita of countries like the US. So for example, around that time period, GDP per capita of the UK and the US were not that dissimilar. Now the US is about 80% GDP per capita bigger than the UK. So this is a real problem. This is fundamentally affecting people's quality of life and living standards. And now within that, the UK has some specific problems, we think. And I would say that in terms of what we can do from here, there's basically three things that we focus on in the Growth Commission. One is tax policy, fiscal policy, and regulatory reform. And echoing what Bim was saying about regulatory reform, I think historically Treasury departments around the world have basically said, well, tax and fiscal policy is what really moves the needle. Regulatory, particularly for a developed country, is a sort of optional extra. Our models are showing actually that that's not the case, and in fact regulatory reform is a bigger mover in terms of GDP per capita than, there are things you need to do in tax and fiscal policy obviously, but don't neglect regulatory reform because it is actually a bigger driver of GDP per capita growth than just focusing on tax and fiscal. And it hasn't had the emphasis, and it is really about, we look at regulatory reform across three dimensions. What is the effect of your regulatory system on your trade openness? If it distorts your trade openness, it's going to drive down GDP per capita. What's its effect on competition in the market? That's going to drive down GDP per capita. And what's its effect on property rights protection? And we look at those three dimensions, and what we're finding is actually the improvements possible in regulatory reform are very significant GDP per capita numbers.
Thanks.